Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely beautiful, kind of abstract philosophical story about reality, grief, and, well, a literal crack in the sky. We're going to see how this wildly strange event reveals some pretty profound truths about how we navigate our day-to-day lives. So, let's just jump right into this bizarre anomaly. Imagine you're just sitting in a park on a totally average Tuesday, and you suddenly realize the sky itself is separated. It's not a weird cloud, it's not a plain contrail, it's a scored line, separated by something way too precise to just be an accident. What would you actually do? Panic? Snap a pic for your feed? Or just sit there and watch? Now, our story anchors this literally impossible event to the most perfectly ordinary setting you could think of: a green park bench. It's been facing east since 1962, tracking an old path where water used to naturally run downhill way before the city was even built. And sharing this bench are two complete strangers: 78-year-old Henry, 33-year-old Mara, and a flock of pigeons pecking at some slightly stale sourdough bread. They are our witnesses. Which brings us to part one, the crack in the sky. What's super fascinating here is how our guy Henry processes this. See, he's a former cartographer, a map maker. So when he spots this crack, his brain immediately starts eliminating scientific explanations. He knows for a fact it's not meteorological, it's not geological, and it's definitely not an optical illusion. Instead, he lands on this startlingly profound conclusion: the crack is a literal discrepancy between our representation of reality and reality itself. The map we use to understand the world has literally split right apart from the actual territory. And honestly, this just brilliantly highlights our human blind spots. Look at how the animals in the park react. You know, pigeons actually have these iron-rich cells in their beaks that act like tiny internal compasses, totally attuned to magnetic fields. So way before Henry or Mara even notice the sky, a gray pigeon just tenses up, feeling this fundamental shift in the Earth's frequency. A stray dog suddenly changes its path with this newfound urgent purpose. The animals are totally dialed into actual physical forces, sensing a massive structural change in the world, while the humans are, just staring at their books or phones. Moving on to section 2, maps versus the territory. To really get this, Henry breaks down map making using the Mercator projection. The standard world map we all grew up staring at in school. Well, here's the secret. It's a lie. Trying to slap a round Earth onto a flat page requires some serious mathematical gymnastics, enlarging the poles, shrinking the equator. It literally makes Greenland look the size of Africa. But Henry calls this a productive lie in service of navigability. Basically, we all just agree on these systematic errors so we can actually function and get from point A to point B. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is a rule from Henry's old cartography professor: a map is not the territory. Think about it. Every single map requires flattening, making selections, and totally omitting the messy reality of the actual ground. Because if a map was as detailed as the territory, well, it would just be the territory. And this isn't just about geography, right? It's about how we build mental maps to navigate our everyday lives, conveniently leaving out all the messy, painful realities we'd just rather not deal with. Let's see exactly how this plays out for our two strangers. Henry? He spent 40 years hiding in aerial surveys, literally looking down at the world from a safe altitude. Meanwhile, his late wife Ruth lived entirely in the messy, ground-level territory of their 41-year marriage. Then you've got Mara. She hides out in the academic study of linguistics in this massive 412-page unfinished novel she carries around. She's built up what she calls an interior distance, just to avoid the direct, frightening reality of her own isolation. They are both absolute experts at building maps, so they never have to touch the territory. This leads us into section 3, the mechanism of silence. Now, Mara studies dying languages, ones with fewer than 100 speakers left, like Ubich or Iak, and she notes something incredibly tragic. The true mechanism of language death isn't actually that dramatic moment when the very last speaker passes away. The real death happens way earlier. It happens in the silence. It's that moment when a parent deliberately stops transmitting their worldview to their child, usually out of love, opting for the national language just so the kid can survive economically. That's when the language, and its entire unique way of seeing the world, just fades into silence. And right here, Mara realizes the tragic flaw in her own field of study. Linguists can build a rigorous academic archive of grammar and vocabulary, sure, but that archive is just a map. Leaving behind a perfect record of a language does absolutely nothing to cure the crushing loneliness of its last speaker. And it definitely can't replace the lived reality of the territory, which is simply a child waking up and speaking that language naturally to another child. This realization completely breaks Mara open. She confesses to Henry that she was basically raised in her mother's covert language of anxiety. It was this invisible, underlying, emotional register transmitted totally below the level of intention. In her mom's code, love was demonstrated entirely by worrying. The outside world was inherently threatening, and fear was always expressed as control. To survive that constant, suffocating anxiety, Mara was literally forced to construct her interior distance. Which brings us right back to that unfinished novel she drags everywhere. She reads this exact quote from the author, Celeste Frayne, out loud to Henry. Mara has been stuck on page 207 for 3 whole months because this quote, it diagnoses her perfectly. It hits her like a ton of bricks. She isn't actually living. She is just acting as the archivist of a life she absolutely refuses to inhabit. Her carefully constructed safety map has completely trapped her. And that brings us to section 4, the art of witnessing. As the afternoon light starts to fade on that park bench, Henry shares some wisdom from his late wife Ruth, who passed away 6 years ago. See, Ruth was entirely grounded in the territory. She got it. She knew that navigating life isn't about having a flawless, error-free map. It's about being brave enough to witness the daily reality right in front of your face. She firmly believed that the ordinary daily filler, like the local baker making sourdough at 4 a.m. or just reusing a plastic bread bag, that filler is actually the entire point of existing. As the clock ticks toward 4 p.m., that bizarre crack in the sky undergoes what Ruth would have called a quickening. Out of the corner of their eyes, Henry and Mara notice the crack suddenly gaining dimension. It stops looking like a flat line drawn on a piece of paper and starts looking deep, like an opening. It feels way less like a wound across the sky and much more like a door. Naturally, this deepening anomaly forces a massive question on both of them, and honestly on us too. What actually exists on the other side? What's on the other side of the maps we draw? What's behind Mara's protective interior distance? If the literal sky is opening up, what is weeding behind it? Then, suddenly, breaking right through their intense philosophical deadlocks, a 7-year-old girl just wanders over to the bench. She stops, looks straight up, and sees the crack. But unlike Henry or Mara, she's totally free of all those rigid adult maps, the academic categories, and the deep-seated anxieties that dictate exactly how we process the unknown. Without the heavy burden of needing a logical explanation or a perfect representation, she just looks up at this terror in reality and drops this line. She instantly sees the crack, not as some terrifying, apocalyptic end-of-the-world scenario, but as something genuinely beautiful. For her, it's just regained access to a light that was always sitting right there behind the sky. Hearing that, Henry immediately thinks of Ruth's ultimate catchphrase, "Isn't that something?" In that moment, he and Mara finally realize that simply witnessing the crack, witnessing reality without scrambling to fix it or categorize it or write some tedious academic paper on it, that is the ultimate act of living in the territory. You don't have to map it. You just have to be brave enough to sit on the bench and look at it. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this to chew on. The maps we build, our routines, our labels, our worries, they absolutely help us survive, but they also keep us at a safe distance from the real world. If your map tore wide open tomorrow, would you panic or would you be brave enough to step right into the white space, look at the territory directly, and actually live in it? Think about it. Are you busy building a map of your life, or are you actually living it?